Hello there my friends, last week we finished building this tiny FV432 from Takom in 1/72 scale, and today I decided I will show you how I painted this little tank in the classic two-tone British camouflage. So first I primed the model in black color. This unifies the model in a single color, so it is easier to paint and weather this way. And then I started working on the green base color. I mixed olive green with flat brown from Vieco. I don't have exact measurements, I just judged it by my eye, and I think the finishing color came out a little too dark, but it was a perfect olive green color for a British or an American tank, so I'm really happy with how it looked. Maybe next time I will add some buff just to lighten it up. I apply this color in very thin layers, and I use several coats to build up the opacity. This way, if you thin your color properly to a almost milk-like consistency, you will end up with a model that almost looks as if it was paintbrushed. I am especially really happy with this finish that I got right here, as you can see. For the next color of the camouflage, the usual color that's used is NATO black. I only had ordinary black, so I again thinned it down and I applied it in only two coats. This way the color was kind of just lighter than it would be if you applied more coats, and it ended up looking very nice. I didn't have exact camouflage made up in my mind, I just went with what I thought looked pretty good, and in the end, as you can see, it looks really nice and also almost airbrush, and I was really happy with the results. So I went in to paint the tracks. I first base coated them with the same flat brown color. I only went over them with one coat, so this way they looked kind of rusty with different shades on different parts of the track. And then once the outer part dried out, I painted the inner part of the tracks as well, just to not get paint on my fingers while the outer part is still not finished. Then the rubber clads on top of the tracks were painted in a German grey color, or at least I hope they are rubber clads. They do look like ones. And then some more detail painting. I painted the huge exhaust on the side of the vehicle with the same flat brown color, just to give it that rusty appearance. And some other details, for example, the tool handles were painted in buff color, making sure I don't paint anything around it so it looks three-dimensional, as it is three-dimensional after all. And also the fire extinguishers on the back were painted in red, although I don't think they would be painted in red in real life. I just liked the different color that they gave the model. Then came the first piece of, I would say, weathering. I started chipping the model. I chipped the model with Russian uniform, lightened down with buff color, and I use sponge chipping method. Now, if you don't know what sponge chipping method is, it's essentially dipping your sponge into a paint, then unloading it onto the paper, and once you have almost no paint on your sponge, you dab it around the raised details and also corners where you would expect the vehicle to get chipped, to create a chipped effect. This is really easy to overdo, and I myself have overdone it several times in the past, which destroyed my models basically. So I tried my best not overdoing it this time, because this is a pretty new operational vehicle. Then for the washes I used Viejo dark grey wash. I thinned it down with water again, and I put it only around the details so I don't make the model messy. This is again something I've done with my previous models, where I overdid it with my washes and I didn't blend them correctly, and then the model just looked messy and really dirty when it wasn't supposed to. So I tried my best not overdoing it this time. The wash was again blended using ordinary tap water, since this is an acrylic product, which is my favorite feature of these products basically. I tried my best to blend everything, not to leave any tide marks, and still leave the wash around the details so they are nicely picked up and visible. Also on the more vertical surfaces I first blended the washes almost normally, just blend them around so there aren't like pools of them, and then I blended them downwards to create a streaking effect that you would see on a operational vehicle. Then came the dry brush method. I again used the same mixture of buff and Russian green. I put my dry brush into the color, then I unloaded it onto the paper, and I lightly glossed over the model to pick out all of the raised areas and details. This is a nice contrasting technique that contrasts with the wash, as the wash picks out the deep crevices and stuff, and dry brush picks out all of the raised areas, which also gives the look of light shining on the model. Then I also went over the model with some light rust dry brushing. This was really subtle and only on the most areas where I would expect some rust, because I didn't want to overdo it, but I wanted to have it there. And then using light rust wash I also made 3 or 4 streaks on side of the vehicle, because I noticed it in the pictures. Nothing too crazy like my previous models, and definitely not like what I am planning in the future. Then for the last effects I started working on the weathering on the lower hull. I used Viejo environment mud to just create a texture. Now you can use this mud to create the weathering itself, but I used it only for the texture, because this way it would look like as if the vehicle was completely clean and then it went into mud, while I want the effect of it being in operation for longer and for a quite long time, where it would get more and more dirty as the time progressed and as it was used. So I used it only for the texture, then painted over. Then I went in with my typical dust effects. For this I use a buff color from Viejo. I thin it down tremendously with tap water, and then I put it on the vehicle, and then I blend it again with tap water. Here you can see me, I kind of spilled it on top of the vehicle, so I already started working on some streaking effects. But real streaking effects are, well, I do them in such a way that I put most of the color on bottom of the vehicle, and then I kind of just push them upwards and downwards till I get nice looking streaks. This is an effect that you have to layer on, so I of course did, and then I also applied it on some parts of the upper areas as well, because obviously it would get dirty as well, and it kind of looked out of place compared to the sides of the vehicle. I recommend layering this effect up until you're happy with how it looks. And then I did essentially the same thing, only on the lower hull with the flat brown color to create a muddy effect, again using references. And I also applied it on all over the running gear, because on the references I couldn't even tell what color the running gear was because it was so dirty. Anyway, that is going to be it for today's video. I really enjoyed painting this tiny model. I wanted to use it only as a test ground for my chieftain, as I've mentioned, but it quickly spiraled out to probably my best model so far when it comes to weathering and the paint job, and I'm really happy with the finish. So next week I am going to make a tiny scenic base for it, and then I am going to move on to the chieftain. So if you'd like to see that, please consider subscribing to my channel, perhaps giving it a like and sharing the video. If you'd like to support me financially, you can go down to my description. I have my Patreon and my Amazon wishlist down there. You can support me that way. Anyway, thank you for watching yet again. I hope you enjoyed and found these techniques helpful, and I will see you in the next week's video.